Hello everyone, how are you doing? Welcome to this live webinar on behalf of the TEFL org. We are a teacher training company. We help people to become English as a foreign language teacher. So if that's the sort of thing you're into, hopefully you will find today's webinar interesting. My name is Carl. I work as a teacher trainer here at the TEFL org. I've helped countless people to become EFL teachers. I also work as a self-employed EFL teacher. I teach online. I also do some face-to-face work for some companies. I work as an EFL examiner, and I've been lucky enough to have taught in many places around the world, including Japan, Sri Lanka, China, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Iraq for a bit, Spain and Italy. So I've been very lucky to have worked in many places around the world. Do let us know where you are. I'm currently here in Belfast, Northern Ireland, where I work. Alan, who is monitoring the chat, he's in Scotland, so he'll be putting in any links that may be needed in the chat, because this is a live webinar. So if you've got any questions, if you've got anything at all that you want to talk about, please do put your comments in the chat, whether you're watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever it might be. It will come through on my screen, or if not, Alan will send them to me round the back of the website somehow. Thank you for tuning in. Right, so today we're going to be talking about academic English, and this is a subject that I really quite enjoy because I worked at a university in Azerbaijan. I worked at a university in Iraq. I also worked in universities in the UK because it's actually quite a big part of teaching in an English-speaking country, academic English. So maybe you want to go abroad and teach and then maybe come home to like an English-speaking country, or you want to move to an English-speaking country, you know, America, Australia, the UK, Ireland, whatever it might be, Canada. There are university jobs that are around in these places. So I'm going to talk a bit about all of these. I'm going to talk about the jobs around the world. I'm also going to talk a bit about the 4 different skills: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So before we start, please, I can see everybody saying hello in the chat. Lovely to see. What do you think are the differences between teaching general English and academic English? Maybe you've got some experience with this. Maybe you haven't and you're sort of trying to guess. But have a little thought, think about it and put it in the chat. What do you think are the differences? And I'll get to your answers in a bit. So I'm going to start, first of all, with some common questions that I get asked by EFL teachers who want to go into teaching universities or want to know more about it, or some sort of points they make. So the first one I get is, I'm not an expert in a subject. So there's sort of the common misconception that to go and teach academic English, you need to sort of have a PhD level or at least a master's level in a certain subject, you know, like, I don't know, biology or business, whatever it might be, because obviously there's a whole range of subjects out there. You do not need to have a specialist subject knowledge in you know, a specific field to go and teach at university. You are not going there to lecture on the subject. You are going there to teach the English level, so the students can then go on to their masters, generally the PhD, or sometimes their undergraduate. Now, in my experience, the majority of students that sort of learn English at university tend to go into something like business studies. So if you do, now you do not have to. I, you know, had a many years teaching at universities, and I do not have a business qualification. But I do think slightly that business studies or anything like that, if you've got any sort of background in that, that can make it a bit more helpful to get jobs, but it's by no means key or crucial to get a job at a university. You do not need to be an expert. Now, what you do need to know about is how the academic world works a little bit in terms of sort of producing essays and grading students. Now, if you've gone through university, you'll probably know all this already. But if you haven't gone for university and you maybe haven't got a degree, that's when it can be a bit of an issue. And you'll see later on that it's almost impossible to get a job in universities without a degree level, at least. Do I need a degree? Yes, you do, really, because one of the things you'll be teaching the students is sort of how to pass a university exam, how to write an academic essay. And, that involves things like referencing, it involves sort of certain academic conventions. And if you don't know that knowledge yourself, how are you going to pass that on? So really, yes, it's not like if you like some countries, you need to have a degree in order to get the visa. Really, to work at university, you need to have a degree because you'll be teaching the sort of university sort of themes, really. And where are the university jobs? So I'm going to talk a bit about that on my very, very final slide. So stick with me and I will get through to those. So, and I can see people saying some answers, some great ideas there about what's the difference between general and academic. So I'm going to talk a little bit first of all. And first of all, basically, there is a shift in focus because you're sort of obviously general. The word is in general. You're using it for maybe a variety of different reasons. You might be using it for a little bit of business. You might be using it for a bit of tourist work. You might be using it in your job yourself. You might not have a particular focus. You just want to learn English. Whereas academic English, EAP, you are using it for a specific purpose. And that specific purpose is basically to get that degree certificate or postgraduate certificate or PhD in your name. So you are trying to use this English for this very specific purpose, not generally. And basically, you're going from a social context generally to an institutional context. So you're trying to change your English and the teaching that you're doing to get people into a certain institution and be able to get through that institution to get where they need to be in life. Vocabulary is quite different. You're going from generally high frequency vocabulary that is used quite a lot in a variety of different ways, to quite academic words. And there is something called the academic word list, AWL, academic word list. That is definitely worth knowing about before you go to teach. If you've got students, they really tend to have to use these academic words in their essays, in their presentations, and they're going to come up a lot in their readings and their listening as well. So there's definitely a shift in focus there. And the tone. So you're basically going from quite a personal tone where you can sort of say, I think this, I believe this, to a more objective and analytical tone where you're not necessarily being so strong with your opinions. You're looking at things from a lot of different ways and you're analyzing things a lot more. And a lot of this is actually to do with your mindset as compared to your English as well, because academic English can be sort of it can be seen as sort of not, I don't know what I was going to answer. I forgot what I said. Objective and analytic. You are sort of going down the route of having to analyze things more than you are to sort of just generally talking about them. I can see some really good ideas. Thank you. Hello to everyone. I can see Rico's in, Pauline's in. Hi. Margaret, Churlo's in. Lots of people saying hello. Sorry if I've missed you there. So some of the ideas about academic English. Yeah. Morici says academic English is more specific, more formal. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's echoed by Helen as well, being more formal. Emicon, yeah, the end goal of teaching English. Casual use of specific reasons. Yes, exactly. So, yeah, generally people do. It's not necessarily an end goal, I would say myself, although I'm not 100% saying you're wrong, Amico. But basically, yeah, once you get through general English, you then tend to go into a specific thing. And for some people, the end goal is academic English. Yeah. Akianian, academic English is a language of its own. It definitely can be with certain fields, I'm sure, but you won't be having to teach a certain field. So your job is to get them to be able to write the essays. Then once they then start their degree in physics or their master's in chemistry, then they will learn the sort of words there. Rico, essay writing, research, reading, writing, vocab discipline, yeah, and Emiko, technical writing, yeah, loads of good ideas there. Thank you. Right, so let's talk about reading first. So one of the first problems that students will have is that the texts become quite long all of a sudden. You know, they go from reading sort of maybe the longest they might have read would be sort of something like an IELTS text, which may be at the most sort of about 800 to 1,000 words, something like that, to all of a sudden being given a book and they have to read the whole books. And that can be very, very daunting to them, and it can overwhelm the students. And part of your job will be to guide how to learn reading an academic as a skill, because it is slightly different how we use it at university to using it generally. You know, students are very, very used to starting on line 1, page 1, line 1, and reading like this. And they want to know every single word. They want to know it all. And you just can't do that at university, because when you go into a library, there's maybe 100 books for your module, your university, your degree, and you want them to be able to select the one, and then within that book, select the chapter, select the section that is important to them. And that's the kind of thing you'll be teaching. And one of the methods that are quite often used is to survey, question, read, recite, review. So have a look a bit more. If you want a bit more information about how to talk about how to teach reading, this is worth checking out. SQ3R. It's a sort of a common technique. I'm going to, on the next slide, show you sort of how it works. But this is definitely something that's worth looking at. The 3 R's being read, recite, and review. So basically, SQ3R, how you need to do that, if you were to teach this, create a worksheet with some headings from a text. So, you know, find an academic text from a journal article, find an academic text from a book, whatever it might be. And you'll see that there's lots of headings within that. Take out the main body, copy and paste it, remove the main bit, and then just leave the headings and create a worksheet where there's just some headings. So you do the heading, maybe then a subheading, a little bit of a gap. You know, it doesn't have to give the whole gap, but just basically show them the text without the main body, but only the headings. Then say in pairs, what do you think the text is about? And they discuss, oh, look at that heading. That heading there talks about mountains. Maybe it's about geography. Oh, yes, there's also a heading here about lakes and rivers. Yes, so I think it's about geography. Oh, I think it could be about the different types of landscapes. Yes, 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 very good, blah, 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 blah. And they say that to each other. They're surveying, so they're sort of looking overall at the text just from the headings. Then you say to them, okay, what questions do you want to be answered in this text? Oh, so they might say something like the things, oh, okay, I'd like to know how old mountains are. Yes, I would like to learn how high the lakes are, something like this, or the rivers. And they sort of say that to each other. They write down some questions that they think will be answered within this text just from the headings. Then you give them the whole text then, and you say, right, okay, these are look at your questions. Are they answered in the text? And that's when they sort of then look at it and go, oh, yes, actually, look here. It tells you here about the mountains. Oh, yes, here it tells you about the size of the lakes or the age of the mountains, whatever it might be. And then so they're reading, and then they are reciting by talking to each other about the answers. Reading, they're literally just doing that. Reciting, they're either talking or they can write down the answers to it. And then in pairs, they then check their answers. They could go to another pair and go, oh, you know, we found this, but we wanted this question to be answered, or we wanted this question to be answered. They check the answers and then they can review it like that. And that is your SQ3R. They question, well, first of all, they survey, then they question, then they read, recite, and they review. Right. Teachers do not have to be do not have to be business experts. Okay, so basically your learners know their job, they know their role. Okay, and your expertise is the language, so you have to show them techniques like you did before. You don't have to show them exactly how to be an expert in their field that they are then going on to study. Okay, right, let's talk a bit about writing. So the difference that they might have gone through now is that they were maybe doing exams where they have to do paragraphs. So they've gone from writing maybe a short essay, 250 words, and they're very much concentrating on 4 or 5 individual paragraphs. And now they've got to sort of take that and go to write whole papers Obviously, if they're going to do something like a master's dissertation, that could be maybe, 10,000 words, which is a massive jump from writing a 250 words IELTS essay, for example. So you've got to guide them how to do that. And the writing is very different in EAP for many, many different reasons. Okay. First of all, tone and voice. So you were all talking about it being more technical, being more formal. Yes, that kind of thing is important. Yeah. But also your voice, the way that they present it in the writing, not saying I think this, it's more sort of being more objective on both sides. We're saying, it could be this, but it might be this. Overall, it could be this, that kind of thing. The length is obviously a lot different. Now, when you're teaching them before they start their masters, before they start the undergraduate degree, you won't be going in and getting them to write a 10,000 word essay. They will do that actually on their masters. But your job is to show them how they used to need to use one paragraph, give lots and lots of detail in that paragraph, and do that maybe 100 different times, whatever it might be, depending on the length. And then that's where you have to get involved by showing them that the length of the paragraphs needs to be sort of a bit longer, and because you're going to need lots of these paragraphs to get up to your 2,000 word essay or your 10,000 word essay. And through that is explaining ideas. They might have previously, when they wrote essays, had like 2 or 3 ideas in a paragraph with a couple of examples or a little bit of information. What they need to do in EAP is get one idea to one paragraph and explain that in lots and lots of detail, giving different examples, giving different sources, that kind of thing. And you have to tell them this because they have to use sources and they also have to use academic conventions. So what do I mean by that? I mean things like in-text citations, where you see a bracket and then the name and then the year. But then it's different if they use a quote. It's different if they use it generally. What happens if they find this idea in 2 or 3 texts? They have to do a reference list at the end. All that kind of thing has to be in the writing, which they didn't have to do before. And you teach those sort of ideas. The key way to get through this is process writing. And process writing is basically a number of stages. And what you're getting them to write an essay not in one go. You're getting them to do it as a process a few times. And the first stage, and you could create worksheets around this because it would take a few lessons to teach them how to do this. The first one is to do a pre-writing stage. Now, a big thing about university writing is that their ideas come from readings, come from texts, or can come from lectures, can come from videos as well, but generally it comes from texts. And they first of all have to gather the ideas through reading. And so they have to sort of think, right, okay, here's my question, my essay question. I've done my reading work for the SQ3R. I found this idea. I'm going to use this in my essay. They write down some notes about this and they think whereabouts the organization in the essay will this come in. So they do the pre-writing, which is sort of thinking about the question, gathering the evidence, doing the reading, maybe listening to some lectures, and then starting to think about organization. They then, after that, draft. So they do one sort of a quick version of it that's not really finished. And they don't really then tend to care too much about the grammar. It's sort of getting the ideas in, getting the correct organization. And at that stage, the good thing then to do is then to do peer review. Get them to check with their partner whether this is a good quality one. And they can give some help, give some ideas, hopefully. Then they revise again and again and again and again and again. So the person then says, gives them some ideas. They might have then together worked on some sort of text that they found. They get that idea, they put that in. Where can they put that in? They need to give more information about this one. They revise and revise again and again and again and again. Then the final stage would be some editing and proofreading. AI could maybe help in that stage, but that's the sort of stages that you'll need to do to try and get them going. You've got to get students used to not writing in one go. So they're very used to getting a question, writing it, being done with it. No, you have to try and get them into this way of doing lots of drafts and getting them to think about things over and over again. Give them worksheets, give them checklists to check they are following academic conventions. So it could be like a tick list. Have you used personal pronouns? Have you used citations? Have you used reference lists? That kind of thing. Do you have one idea to a paragraph? Give them worksheets, they check lists, they tend to see if everything is okay. And it does take 2 or 3 drafts to do it. You know, an academic doesn't just write their paper. Even someone whose first language is English and they're an expert, they don't just write their paper first and then just hand it in or submit it for a journal. They do this process writing over a few different stages. Right, listening, lectures and seminars. So the main difference in listening is that they're listening at length on one subject. They might have come from a world where they sort of maybe at the most hear clips that are about 10 minutes long. Here they are going to be listening, sit down in a lecture for maybe an hour, or could be a 2-hour lecture, listening to someone talk about one subject. And students want to listen and they want to understand every word. It's just a natural inbuilt ability. But you think in your own language, when you're listening to something long, you tune in, you tune out. You don't necessarily listen for the whole hour. You know, students want to listen and want to understand every word, but it's not natural. It's just not normal for this to happen. They also might come across in lectures very different styles. You might have a lecturer who's really quite boring and sounds like this and maybe has quite boring slides and this kind of thing. They have to get used to it. They've got no way of going through this. Also different accents. You know, if you've got one lecturer who has quite a difficult accent, then it can be quite difficult to hear. But the key aspect to teach is note taking. And because when you listen to a lecture, you're supposed to take notes. You don't write down everything word for word. You just write down a few notes. So how do you do this? You do something like a gap fill activity. So find a TED talk to start that's about 15 minutes long. Or if you go to TED.com, there's loads and loads on there and a load of different subjects. And then what you need to do is listen to that and create some notes. You're not writing down every word. You're just writing down some notes as if that you were in that lecture. You can, and then you type them up just to make it a bit easier for you. If you want a bit of help with that, look up something called Cornell Notes. That can give you a bit of information about that. Right, then remove part of the notes. So just some bits that maybe are not so important. Maybe just some bits that are quite easy to listen to. Remove those parts of the notes. Things like headings can be quite useful to remove. Things like examples that they might have found. These sort of things can be quite easy for the students to listen to. But you've removed them from the notes and there's just a gap, or you put a line in your notes. And then the students listen and try to fill in the gaps. And if they can fill in those gaps, they can follow the lecture. They can sort of see that they don't need to understand every single word. They're just understanding the key parts of the lecture. Then they can then try and talk about it, recreate the lecture, discuss what they had, or you could give them an essay question to talk from that one and see what happens there. But yeah, listening gap fill activities is what you need. I can see some questions coming in. Please, if you do have any questions at all, if you're still tuning in, I hope you are, about academic English. I can see one. Helen, I can see your question. I'm going to get to that in a second. I don't have many more slides left. Right, so speaking, what do you need to teach for speaking? Presentations and seminars are the way forward, because now students, first of all, may be used to giving presentations. They might have in their own country or before in a language school, something like that. They might have given a presentation. They might feel like they're used to giving presentations. Academic presentations are slightly longer generally. A lot more formal. They're talking about specialized subjects. You sometimes have to give presentations in groups and just go from that. The problem is they often read from a script. So quite often they will create some PowerPoint slides and then they have written out word for word what they're going to say. They go, this is my presentation, blah, 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 and they talk like that. It's very boring. It's very droll. They get a low mark. That doesn't help them to pass their qualification. So they often read from a script. You've got to get them to try and talk about from notes, basically. Seminars, they may be used to being a bit passive. a lot of Asian students especially come from an education system where they don't really speak up. They don't question the teacher. They don't question each other. And if they then have a seminar, they're supposed in the UK or Australia, America, somewhere like that, they then tend to be quite passive, and they need to speak up at an English speaking university. That's what they're expected to do. If it's a graded seminar, and some seminars are graded, then they will need to be active in that in order to get the grade. So for presentations, practice speaking from notes, and for seminars, practice interrupting, because generally what happens is one person starts speaking and then they all just sit there nodding and listening. It turns into a strange kind of lecture, whereas they need to be able to get their point in. You need to interrupt. So a game you could play is something called interrupting bingo. Give a group of students a topic to discuss, which they can have quite easy opinions on. Doesn't have to be an academic one. You know, it could be like, who's the best football player? Who's the best? What's the best food? Something like this, something that they have opinions on. And then give them a list of interrupting formal phrases. Excuse me, can I just say something here? Or, I'm not sure I agree with you there. So they've got interrupting phrases there. And then basically, they have to let each other speak for at least 20 seconds. So, you know, my favorite football player is Cristiano Ronaldo, because Cristiano Ronaldo has scored the most goals in the world. Excuse me, I just need to disagree with you there. I think Messi is better because he's more creative. And then he speaks for 20 seconds. Then the next person interrupts. You have to let them speak for 20 seconds, because if not, they just spend the whole time interrupting each other. And then basically they think, yes, I used that phrase, ticked that one off. Right, now I'm going to try and get in this phrase. And then they do this sort of for 2 or 3 minutes and see if they can get used to interrupting each other formally and nicely. Right, then the last thing to talk about in terms of skills, which isn't necessarily like a general English skill, it's more of an academic skill, and that's critical thinking. And this can be the biggest challenge for students. And I have tried many, many times to get students to think a bit more critically, and some just get it and want to do it. Some just don't see it or just don't want to get it. And a lot of that comes from their background, where they have been told to just regurgitate information instead of thinking critically. It's about a change of mindset as much as anything. They have to be able to change the way that they think about academic life and their subjects, basically. And you have to sort of say to them, it is okay to question this. It's okay to disagree with authority. People like me, people like the academics you're reading, your lecturers. It is okay to question them. It's okay to disagree with them. They expect it, and actually they really, really like it. And that can be really, really tough for students. Questioning and disagreeing is great. So sources, they need to think about the different sources. So, you know, if they find and lots of students, when they write their essays, they want to use YouTube, they want to use general websites. They need to question about the quality of those. They need to question about the bias of those kind of things. They also need to look for agreement, look for contradictions within sources, see if they can find that, because that's what they need to do to think critically. So how to get them critically thinking? This is one of the ways I've done it, to various degrees of success, it must be said. Start with giving them very biased texts, very, very biased texts. And a lot of these come from companies or governments. You know, when companies pay for some research, you know, or governments, they sort of create something to try and show their point of view. Try and find some of this from like government websites or business websites. See if you can find press releases, that kind of thing. And then you sort of say to them, you know, why have they written this? What are they trying to do with this? Why do you think that this is 100% true? What could be wrong about this? Why could they be wanting to say this? You know, give them a few questions. Another way to do it is to look at news stories that have different opinions. You know, we live in quite a world at the moment where people have very extreme opinions. So we can find newspapers which have extreme opinions about things. Different side of politics. You know, in the UK, we have sort of a newspaper called The Guardian, which is quite left-wing. We have lots and lots of right-wing papers, and you sort of find a news story or an opinion piece, and you sort of see, look, these are two people, both with high qualifications, both very good speakers and writers of English, but they have different points of view. And then you say to them, what do you think after reading these? Who do you agree with more? What do you believe more? That kind of thing. Get them thinking critically about different things. And then they have to then sort of try and come out with a balanced opinion using things like may, might, could, that kind of thing. Right. Finally, and please, if you do have any questions at all about EAP, please put them in chat. EAP jobs. So UK and Ireland is a good place for finding good early career EAP jobs. Now, Ireland, you could get jobs there with an EU passport. Right. The UK is slightly different. Some university jobs in the summer, they're called pre-sessional jobs. They are remote. They do take people on remotely that you don't necessarily have to be in the UK. And sometimes they will allow you to work there without a UK visa. So it sort of does depend on the university and does depend on the situation. Okay. But UK and Ireland are good places to find some jobs. And you're looking really for something called pre-sessional jobs. Summer pre-sessional jobs. These tend to be sort of 10, 12-week contracts that run from, say, June to August, something like that. And you'll be teaching students English before they start their master's or their undergraduate degree in September. Okay. And this is how I got my first year-round work. Now, not always, because the universities have more students, EAP students, in the summer than they do the rest of the year, but it can lead to year-round work. It's not easy, but it can lead to year-round work. There's lots and lots of these jobs on a website called BALEAP, BALEAP, BALEAP. Okay, have a look on that one. Right, Asia, slightly different. You will have, let's go with China. You will have Chinese universities recruiting people to work in them. And they have sort of various degrees of sort of need, pay, conditions. Sometimes you might just be going in there just to teach speaking. All right. So very, very varied. The same is sort of true with Korea, a lot of speaking jobs in universities. Japan is quite difficult to get university jobs in. Speaking jobs where you just teach speaking, but like full university jobs can be quite tricky. You need to have a PhD or be working towards a PhD. Now, one of the things to look for is something called joint venture jobs. Now, this is basically where an American, Australian, or British university has opened a campus in Malaysia, China, Vietnam, Thailand. They're all over Asia. So have a look for that. Also in Kazakhstan, I think there's a couple as well. So just have a look for these. These tend to be better paid. They tend to be better quality jobs. They tend to follow sort of the American, British, Australian education system. So you might know a bit more about it. So have a look for these kind of things. You'll find them advertised sort of on a lot of different websites. The Middle East tends to be really, really well-paid university jobs. If you get yourself into a university in the Middle East, you're laughing for the money. Right. Foundation year programs tends to be the way forward. And these, again, tend to be sort of these tend to be a year-long program before they start their undergraduate masters, or before they go to a English-speaking country to study. Okay, so foundation year programs are the way forward. Now, the last one, and these are companies that have lots of jobs all around the world with different criteria, different packages. The companies are Into, Kaplan, and Study Group. I'll let you make your own mind up about these. Do a bit of research and see whether you think that they are generally what you want to get into. Okay, because it does suit some people more than others. but have a look at those 3 companies and go on their website and see if they've got jobs around the world. Now, these EAP jobs, the requirements do vary. Probably Asia is the easiest one to get some jobs in, not necessarily the joint venture jobs, but like the university jobs in China or Vietnam, whatever it might be, tend to be a little bit easier to get, especially than the Middle East, or especially than the UK of Ireland. Probably the easiest is Asia, then the UK and Ireland, and then probably the Middle East. The global jobs with these 3 companies do vary by different things. Now, some do need high-level qualifications. A lot of Middle East jobs are looking for postgraduate level qualifications. They're looking for masters. The really well-paid ones, you do need a PhD in, and you are expected to have these because they have this feeling that you can't teach a master's unless you have a master's. And, you know, maybe they are right, to be honest with you. It kind of depends on your way of thinking, but these are definitely worth looking into. Now, I can see here, Emmy, before I get to some of the other questions, has asked, is there a website for reputable leads on these jobs? Right. There's not one website. There is a website called jobs.ac.uk. Jobs.ac.uk. They only show jobs in universities. They quite often have academic English jobs in. However, a lot of those can be sort of the top ones, that are wanting a lot of qualifications for. You will see university jobs on our website sometimes. So if you go to TEFL.org, go to the top and click on jobs. You will also see university jobs on eslcafe.com. You will also see jobs on TEFL.com. We are TEFL.org. There's also a website called TEFL.com. And you will see jobs for China. You will see jobs for lots of different ones on there. Okay. You've just got to delve through them all, do a bit of research, look at the universities and just see if any of those are right for you. Yeah, Emmy, they do include Chinese jobs. Helen, right. Sorry, I should say thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for tuning in, everyone. I hope you found that useful. If you've got any comments or any questions, please do put it in the chat. Right, let's scroll up to some of the questions. So Helen, hi. Do you need a special qualification to teach academic English? No, you don't. You need to have your TEFL certificate, okay, your 120-hour TEFL certificate, and you probably almost certainly will need to have a degree. You got those 2 things, then you can go away. If you can find a job that matches your general qualifications, that's fine. Now, you can do extra learning modules in things like academic English. Have a look on our website, tefl.org, but they're not necessary, okay? If you've got your 120-hour qualification. Now, you will see that some ask for things like CELTA, ask for deltas, ask for masters. These tend to be the higher level ones. Generally, the base thing you need is your TEFL certificate and a degree. Yeah. Morrissey, yes, an idea where students try to fill in your notes. Yes, exactly. So you've given them the headings. They then try and fill in the bits that you've deleted. And it might just be you've deleted specific words in the listening. You might have deleted sort of specific language, sort of in addition. It could be sort of, it depends on the level. It could be you leave are you only giving the headings and then they have to fill in as much as they can between it. But that's a way to sort of think about with your own notes. And it's a good way to get them sort of looking at how notes should look and the fact that they don't need to write down every word for word. I hope that answered your question. Margaret, the idea for a biased text is very helpful. Good. Yeah. I hope you find that because, most academic texts they read and they've been told to read by their lecturers won't be really biased. But looking at a biased one first can help them to see that bias exists in the world. And, when someone writes an academic book, they tend to not have any bias, but being able to critique a very biased text and then look a little bit more carefully at an academic text can help. Yeah, glad you like that one. Morris as well likes it, and useful in the casual English class as well. Yeah, I think it could be. Emmy, answer those two. Great. Rico, sources for Latin American opportunities, best countries. Right. So Latin America for universities is not the easiest. Probably out of all of those would be Mexico. I have seen Mexican jobs advertised on eslcafe.com, for example. My wife worked at a Mexican university for a while. I don't know how she got this job. That was way before she met me. But yeah, Mexico is probably the best. Now, I've done a webinar, Rico, where I talk about teaching in South and Central America. It's not the easiest of places to get teaching in, to be honest with you. You tend to have to be there already, or you tend to have special visas already and that kind of thing. So it's not the easiest, but you do see them sometimes advertised, and you can also write directly to them. That's the other thing to do as well, Rico. Lots of people saying thank you. Great. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Yeah, there's a link in there to our EAP course, so it's worth having a look at that one as well. Maurice, you got a clear idea as life could take an interesting direction? Might get into. Right. The thing I would say about academic English is it's quite a good way of making EFL, turning EFL into a proper career. You know, you can go into lots of things after you've taught EAP. It opens a lot of doors. Yeah. Aki, can you teach EAP online and companies that would be worth investigating? So basically, with EAP, you're being directly employed generally by the university. Sometimes you're employed by an agency who have a deal with sort of a few different universities. That's what I did in Japan with a company called Westgate. But you tend to be working directly with a university. So the university would advertise directly on their websites, such as Bar Leap, okay, as I said, or jobs.ac.uk. So really, you're not thinking about a company, you're thinking about a university. And some of them do offer, especially in the summer courses, online pre-sessional courses. They're not as many as the face-to-face. There's definitely not as many EAP online teaching jobs as there is general English teaching jobs. What I would say is it could be the kind of thing that you could start teaching yourself, could be quite useful. I think there is definitely a market for helping students that have sort of gone through an English for academic purposes course and then are now on their masters or now on their undergraduate, and they need a bit of help on that. I do think that there's a bit of one-on-one work that you could get there. Emmy, you have 8 years of professional regulatory experience. The views is competitively helpful for academic visit. Yeah, it would do. Yes, for sure. Definitely would help you. I had about 2 years of general English teaching, some exam English teaching, when I taught my first university job. What I would say is, and I probably should put that on the slide, is like teaching exams is a good way to also show that you can teach academic English, because if you can get students to pass a Trinity, an IELTS, a Cambridge exam, then hopefully you can then take that into a university and help them to do that as well then. Okay. So I hope that works out for you. I've got one more question, Maurice. I'm just going to quickly get in and I'm going to be done. Not strictly an academic English question, but you have a Russian diploma. Are there different views? It can be legalized. Yeah, I think, yes, it can. Yes, for sure, it can. Now, I don't know much specifically about Russian diplomas, but generally, I think as long as it's a 3-year degree, that tends to work. Now, you need to check with Asia University what they will take as a diploma. Yeah. But they'll be able to tell you straight away whether they accept a Russian diploma. Quite often it's about your passport you have as well, Maurice. Okay. Thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. I can see lots of people saying thank you, and I really, really enjoyed all your comments today. So thank you very much for staying in. Now, we've got loads and loads of stuff on our website. Go to TEFL.org. Got links to podcasts, we got links to blog pages, we got links to our courses, we got links to jobs, loads of stuff on TEFL.org. Also, if you want, we've got loads of these videos on a range of different subjects. You know, if you want to teach in the Middle East, for example, I've done webinars where I just talk about that. Go to our website, go to our YouTube page, and YouTube, and then type in TEFL.org. You will see my face all over the place. After we see all the headings, and then you look at them, and then you'll see me, and I can talk you through lots of different things on that. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Bye-bye.